ITV News and Sport. So today the cohesion of multi-ethnic societies is at risk across the globe. In fact, throughout history to the present day, African countries have been facing this challenge. Historical inequalities and social division as well, undermining cohesion and also sowing seeds of instability, not just in South Africa but across the continent. So with this in mind, how is it that Africa can build a future where ethnic and other differences are drivers of growth and development rather than sources of division and instability? Well, UCT's Southern Africa Labour and Development Research Unit, the Japan International Cooperation Agency and the Institute for Justice and Reconciliation have launched a book on social cohesion in an effort to look at ways to build a stable future for Africa. Well, to talk to us some more about the book, we are joined in studio by Professor John Lonsdale. He's, of course, an emeritus professor at Cambridge University. He's not alone. Also joining us is the Executive Director of the Institute for Justice and Reconciliation, Mr. Stanley Henkeman. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
So this is an interesting discussion because I remember that if you had talked social cohesion perhaps 4 years ago, you were in for a heated debate because the South Africans almost wanted to talk about social cohesion. I feel like now it's an even more difficult conversation to have in South Africa than it was a few years ago, perhaps even 20 years ago. What do you say to that?
Indeed, it has been, and it becomes increasingly difficult because people are not seeing the fruits of social cohesion. People generally, and particularly those who are marginalized in terms of poverty levels and so on, feel excluded. And why must we talk about coming together when we are not recognized? And so the other interesting aspect is the fact that young people are beginning to problematize this issue of social cohesion as well, because they are saying we're supposed to be the beneficiaries of this new dispensation, and we have the same issues and the same struggles that our parents have. And so, yes, it's not an easy discussion, but it's a necessary and important discussion.
What I think a lot of South Africans don't realize is that it's a difficult and necessary discussion on the continent as well, Prof, isn't it?
Indeed it is, and not only in the African continent, of course. Europe has tended to think that things are going wrong in Africa. We now realise that very much the similar things are going wrong in Europe, and we all have to learn from each other. I think there's been quite a considerable change in attitudes to the problem, recognising that we're all in it together. It's not a peculiarly African problem.
It's the sort of book then that I suppose raises that question of what it is that each of us can do, right? Firstly, where do we get the book? Because I think it certainly is a resource that we all need to use. But what do you want to get out of it?
So the idea of the book is really just to talk about what the critical issues are in different parts of the continent. And I have not been part of writing the book. My interest and my speciality is South Africa, but it certainly is a book where one can get a sense of what the issues are for people in other parts of the continent, but it does also highlight some South African issues.
Yeah. Is there a site that we can go to look at the book? I think if we look at the IJR website, we should be able to find it soon published.
We will make sure that we will point to the right direction on the IJR website.
Yeah, I do want to say this just as we wrap up, because we really don't have a lot of time. But this is the thing. When we talk about social cohesion in South Africa, quite often we talk about then reparations first or restitution first before we have a cohesive country, and perhaps that may very well be true. But surely there is a responsibility that we all have as Africans and as South Africans to find a way to get closer to each other. Thank you so much to our guests, Professor John Lonsdale, Emeritus Professor at the Cambridge University, and also Dr. Stanley Henkeman, Executive Director of the Institute for Justice and Reconciliation. We take a look now at what's happening in the world of business.